Hi, my name is S.A.HODDER, and welcome to this first class in Introduction to DSLR Photography. The full class is based around what I teach at the College of the North Atlantic here in the corner of Newfoundland. It's a manual I've been writing myself over the last 7 years, and I've been teaching to classes around Western Newfoundland in private groups, one-on-one classes. And it's a breakdown of how to get the most out of your camera and to understand the functions of your camera. So for the first class here, we'll be talking about shutter speeds, how to control your shutter speed, and what effect the shutter speed can have on your pictures, the quality of the pictures, and the pictures that you want to be able to achieve when you're out with your camera. So get your camera ready, and let's have some fun. The first thing to know about your shutter speed in your camera is how it actually works. Because by understanding how it works and how you need to operate your camera for when you're using your shutter speed is the most important part. The shutter speed is built into the camera. It's part of the camera. So this is an old film camera, good old-fashioned SLR camera. And the shutter actually sits in the back of the camera right here. It's a set of curtains. These still exist on most cameras today except for when we go to the mirrorless cameras. What this does is it opens for a fraction of a time to expose the film or the sensor in your camera and lets in light. And this works on different settings that is controlled from the top of the camera. So on this Canon here, it's controlled on the top dial that's right here. And with this you can then change your shutter speed on your camera. On this camera, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to show you what's a standard average shutter speed is, because that's the most important thing to understand is what the standard is and what it's used for. So standard of a shutter speed is a 1/125th of a second. For most people that will sound like it's fast. Ask Usain Bolt or anybody like that, they will say, yeah, that's fast, because that's how small of a fraction it is. But on a camera it is just a standard. And what that actually would look like in a camera is that when you press the release button, yes, you can hardly see it. That's how fast it moves. Let's try it again with the curtain open. So you can see it only lets in a fraction of a light. During this time it lets in enough light to expose the film and capture what it is you're taking a picture of. Now this can be changed onto the camera when you use the dial here. And when you change the dial, and let's say that we want to go to a little bit slower to take something, what will happen is that it extends the amount of time that the shutter is open, and that means it exposes the sensor or the film with more light, and whatever is in front of the camera will some way be taken in. Now the longer that the shutter speed is open, the more light it lets in, so you can't just use whatever shutter speed you want to for anything. Because if you go out on a nice sunny day like it is outside today and take a picture at 1 second, what can happen is that the shutter stays open for that 1 second, and that means too much light will come in. So your shutter speed is based around the amount of light that comes in. So if you wanted to take something that's, let's say, moving, like animals or birds or anything like that, well then you of course will need a faster shutter speed. This is 1/1000th of a second. Okay, again, hardly anything gets through. So how does it actually work when you are taking pictures? Well, that's the next step we're going to get into. I'm going to show you some pictures and explain how these were taken, and I'm going to put down and mark down on a whiteboard what the shutter speed actually looks like on your camera and how you actually use it to your advantage. So as I said, the shutter speed is a specific setting that is controlled by the camera itself. And the biggest thing to remember when dealing with shutter speeds and you control it and then you look on the back of your screen on your camera is that by having your camera at 1/125th of a second, this is our standard shutter speed. That is most of the time used for taking pictures like portraits, or if you're taking pictures of the kids, or if you're out around the garden taking pictures and stuff like that, because it's just a standard amount of time that you go into it. Now from here you can go two ways. You can go to a slower shutter speed, so which can be like 6/10 of a second, which is pretty much half of the shutter speed and lets in more light. When you start getting to these numbers here, these can be used for lower light situations where you have somewhat of a steady hand that you can be using. But once you get past this point here and you go to 1/3 of a second, then the camera becomes harder to control. And what I mean about that is that you can actually observe and get shaking in your pictures, which can be designated by this picture here, where you can see the trim that goes around here has come because of shaking in the hand, so it adds a blurriness to your picture. And that's really something you don't want to. So what I tell most of my students is that when you go to this shutter speed right here, or below the 60th, 6/10 of a second, to use a tripod, because of the fact of that it can observe and remove any kind of movement from your hand. Some people will have a steadier hand than others. Some people might have to use a tripod at a faster shutter speed, and it again all depends on the lensing. But just for being with the basic, and most people right now when you get a camera use the standard kit lens that comes with your camera, which is the 18 to 55mm. Then when you get to a 1/3 of a second, then use your tripod to avoid having a shake in your picture. Now from here you can keep going down and to different sections. You can go to like 1/15 of a second. You can go to 1/8 of a second, 1/4 of a second, and then to 1/2 of a second. And all of these, when you're going here, are always shown off on most cameras with a slash. So you have the 1/over. Because of the fact that it's a part of a second. Once you get to 1 second and slower, then it'll always be shown like this. So anytime you look at your camera, if you're wondering why your pictures are coming out blurry or shaken, always look at the shutter speed and to see what the number is and how small the number is that's after the 1, or if there's no 1, if it has a colon, well then you know that it is then, or apostrophe, then you know that it is way too slow for being handheld. Now from 1 second, and would you ever use a 1 second shutter speed for anything? Yes you can, because there's a lot of different things that you can do with your camera with 1 second, because you can actually absorb pictures that show up with a nice flooding of the color for, let's say if you wanted to do streaky water, or if you want to do what's called a silky water effect, because you capture the movement within your picture. And this is a big thing to remember with the shutter speed, as the slower the shutter speeds that you have, the more light gets in, but also the more movement is allowed into your pictures. And that can create some great effects on your pictures when you're taking pictures. So depending on what it is that you're trying to do, because from 1 second you can always double it and go down to 2 seconds, or you can go down to 5 seconds, or you can go down to 15 seconds, or you can go all the way down to 30 seconds on your camera. Now how do you control this? And right now you might be looking at your camera and saying, oh my god, I don't know what's going on here. And that's if you have your camera right now in auto. What I'm going to get you to do is that you're going to change the camera on your setting, and you're going to put it into, if you have a Canon, you put it into TV mode, or if you have a Sony or a Nikon or anything, then you just put it onto the S mode. These stand for time value or shutter speed. And what these let you do is, it's to put your camera into a semi-automatic state where you can then take pictures and control your shutter speed specifically. The camera will do the rest of the work based on the shutter speed that you have your camera on, but it lets you decide what it is that you want to achieve with your picture. So if you want to go with a slower shutter speed, so let's say like the 15th of a second, or if you want to go to a 30th of a second, again that'll all depend on the type of picture that you're trying to take and what you're trying to do. So let's go back to slower shutter speeds. So 1 second is a great time frame for using for doing water pictures. So for if you want to get streaking water in your pictures. Now, would you ever use the 15th of a second? Yes, you can actually, and you can get some great pictures from that. And I'm going to show these ones here now. I'm just going to remove the whiteboard. So when would you use the slower shutter speeds? So this can be done when you're taking pictures and going like with something like this here, if you want to do a little bit of a special effecting picture with steel wool, which can be pretty great. This picture specifically was taken at a 20-second time frame. I was in the middle of spinning it, teaching a class how to actually do specialty photography and doing the steel wool circles, which is awesome. The next type you can also do is when you go to, if you want to do long exposure and get the streaking lights from cars. So this was taken on 30 seconds. And by having on 30 seconds, you get this nice long streak of car lights here. And you can do that anywhere where you have free access to looking at cars coming, so any intersection at the street or alongside the highway or anything like that. This one here has the city of Cornerbrook in the background, and then people are coming up around the turn here. And I was taking this, and as you can see with the snow here, yes, it was taken in April, and yeah, not very nice out, still snow. But yeah, so that's just part of it. So this is what you can use a long shutter speed for, besides creating the silky water effects. You can also use it for astrophotography. You want to take pictures of the stars, or any kind of special effect photography that you do want to do. So the next step we're going to go to is we're going to go the other way, and we're going to go to the faster shutter speeds, and I'm going to tell you what that actually does and lets you do. So what are the faster shutter speeds? So faster shutter speeds is anything that opens and closes the shutter mechanism to expose the lights faster than the standard 125th of a second that we have. So to go from here, you'll pretty much go from 125 to 250. And when would you use 250 of a second? Well, this is something I use myself for, like, if I'm taking pictures of my dog when he's out running around, or if I encounter some moose or caribou when I'm out on a hike or anything like that, because the bigger animals like the moose and caribou don't move as fast, so your chance for capturing them at a 250th of a second is a lot greater than smaller animals. Like birds and stuff like that. So this is where I use the 250th. Now sometimes you also use this for kids when they're running around, because again, kids don't slow down a lot and they don't stop a lot, so you might find this beneficial for if they're out in the yard playing or playing sports or anything like that. The next one I use then is 1/500th of a second. And this is the main one I use for when I'm doing stuff like some figure skating, or if I'm at a soccer game or anything like that. Like, that's not a faster paced game or anything that's faster, but it's still at a higher pace than, let's say, a moose running in or a caribou or anything like that there, because you still want to be able to catch it, let's say if the goalie makes a save or if he heads the ball or anything like that. From here I normally go to them 1,000th of a second, and this I then use for taking pictures of the birds, like this blue heron that I took a picture of while it was catching a fish and is hanging in the middle of the air, as you can see. I also use this for snowboarders or skiers, anything like that, when they're coming downhill, so faster sports, and because it lets me freeze them, like with this skateboarder, freezing him in midair, jumping off of the. So next from here, then you can then go to 1/2000th of a second. You might think, well, isn't that overkill? No, it's not, because again, it all depends on what you're taking a picture of. So you might find it actually sometimes with smaller birds, because they really work and move very fast. But you can also use it for some sporting events. Let's say if your kids are playing volleyball, or if they're playing swimming or anything like that there, because again, if you want to freeze the water in midair or anything like that. Now, when you go to faster than this, that's and 1/2000th, but also 1/4000th of a second is what you use for high performance sports. So, like, say, if you're taking pictures of Michael Phelps when he's doing his butterfly, and you want to catch him in mid-air coming out of the water with the water hanging from his body, well, then you would need to capture it at 4/1000th of a second, just get those small little droplets hanging mid-air. And also you would use these for if you're taking pictures of high performance sports like NASCAR or Formula One racing or anything like that, because with these cars coming around the corners at 300 kilometers an hour, uh, to be able to see them and not be just a streak of nothing, by being at 4/1000th of a second, you'll have a greater chance of capturing that car in a clear picture. Now, some of the newer cameras can go to 1/8000th of a second, and some, and if they're not already out, will be going to 1/16,000th of a second. Again, this is for high performance stuff that you want to use that for. So this is the biggest thing when you're dealing with the faster shutter speed. It's strictly made for one thing, and that is to freeze motion, because that's what you want to do, is to capture something while it's happening without having any blur or anything like that in your pictures. So this was a full explanation of the shutter speed, how it works, and what effects it will have on your pictures when you're taking pictures. So please mark this down. Faster shutter speeds, so the bigger number after the one over, is to freeze motion. So if you're taking pictures of birds, flying around, wildlife, sports, you need a larger number. Now, not to say that a 1/1000th will do, you might have to go faster, but it will have different effects on your pictures in that way. If you wanted to take portraits, then you'll take pictures at about 1/125th of a second, down to, depending on age-wise, you can always suggest don't go lower than 1/610th of a second. Because 6/10ths of a second, then you start getting the movement within the picture, and people move a little bit when they're actually, without thinking about it. So you might get some blurriness from that, but don't go below the 6/10ths. Especially when you're doing children, then you really don't want to go below 125th of a second. You might actually have to, if they're out running around, go faster to 250th of a second, because they don't like sitting still. But that's just part of being a child. We all remember that. And then when you want to have some fun with your camera and want to do a little bit extra, then you can slow down your shutter speed and go out. Sunsets is a great time to try the slower shutter speeds as well. Waterfalls, find some waterfalls. Do the cars. Try the stars, stuff like that, and just to try to see and try the difference. So this is my challenge to you, is take your camera for the next week, put it on your shutter speed priority, so if it's Canon TV, or if it's Nikon or Sony, anything like that, then put it on S for your shutter speed priority. The camera will do the rest, but then try to take pictures using set settings. So let's say you start off with at 1/250th of a second, and then you go to 1/500th of a second, and see the difference it makes on taking pictures of a landscape. And then go up to 1/1000th of a second, just so you can see the difference it'll make onto your pictures. The same thing in the evenings, if you go to a waterfall, try that and put your camera on, put it on a tripod, and find a waterfall or two that comes out, overflow from a high road or whatever. Put your camera on a tripod and put your camera, and let's start at 1/610ths of a second. So 6/10ths of a second. And then take another picture at 15th of a second. And then take a picture at 1/4 of a second, and finish off by taking one at 1 second. And see the differences between your pictures and how much movement it adds to the water by doing these. Now, when you do this one, watch out with how much sunlight there is, because the more sunlight, the more washed out your picture will become, because there's too much light coming in. So keep that in mind when you're taking your pictures. So if it's an overcast place, it's perfect. If it's somewhere that's clouded in or is covered in by trees or anything, that's perfect too, because not a lot of sunlight will get through, and will create this effect more and better for you. And then try to go out and put your camera on the tripod alongside the road, and then start out with taking a picture at 5 seconds, and then take one at 15 seconds, and then take one at 30 seconds. And then try to see the outcome and with the streaking of the colors that is happening within your picture to see how it actually changes the vibrancy of the picture. So please, take your time, go out, have fun, and do this over the next week. And thanks for tuning in to my class on shutter speed and how to use it and what it does to affect the quality of your pictures. Stay tuned. The next class will be all about aperture and how to control your f-stop and aperture on your camera and in your lenses. Take care. Have a good day. We'll see you soon.